Hello and good morning and good evening to everyone watching. My name is Neil and welcome to the AthenaX live stream. Today we've got a really special guest. Her name is Jess Zhang. Jess, welcome for our audience. Who are you? Tell us a bit about yourself and Blockus.
Hey everyone, I'm Jess. I'm the founder CEO of Blockus. Blockus is your on-one ecosystem for Web3 gaming. Our mission is simple: make Web3 gaming seamless. We provide a B2B tool stack that helps game studios go on-chain, everything from infrastructure to distribution. Starting this year, we're also rolling out B2C channels so players can easily discover, engage with, and play great on-chain games without friction.
Nice. So, welcome to the show, Jazz. We've been talking for a while now, and last week you were just telling me that you spent some time in Roblox. You also spent some time in Airbnb, and like during our conversations, these were really serious companies, and you left those right to essentially pursue entrepreneurship in Web3. This is scary. So tell us what made you decide to jump into bridging IPs and crypto together.
I spent time at Roblox and Airbnb, two world-class companies that deeply understand platforms, communities, and network effects. But during the 2021 bull market with the NFT run, what really stood out to me was that crypto wasn't just financial speculation. It was a new way to own digital identity, assets, and culture. So that's why I left and started in crypto. What felt missing was execution at the consumer and IP level, and this is still true today. Big IPs have massive global demand, but crypto lacked the infrastructure and UX to support them responsibly. Blockus exists to bridge that gap, bring real IP, real studios, and real players into crypto in a way that actually scales and makes sense for mainstream
I
gaming.
see. Okay, let's get into the technology for blockers a little bit later. But let's go back to what you just talked about, which were IPs, right? And when we think about successful IPs from Web3, we automatically gravitate to the two main ones, which is the Sport Ape Yacht Club and more recently the Pudgy Penguins. Of course, there's Nouns Dao as well, but like that was some time back, and they still my very much loved community. But what are some of the key reasons that consumers resonate with an IP? Is it the way it looks? Is it the way it makes you feel? Tell us a little bit more from what you've experienced from yourself.
Yeah, when you look at Bored Ape Yacht Club and Pudgy Penguins, the common thread isn't just the art, it's identity and belonging. So many of us have those PFPs,
Nice.
I have a doodles, right? These these IPs gave people a way to signal who they are online and feel part of something bigger than themselves. And that's very important to us for our online identity. And I think successful Web3 IPs do a few key things really well. Clear identity, you instantly understand what the brand
Hmm.
stands for. Community first, ownership feels participatory, not passive. You're a member, not just a customer. Cultural relevance, they live where internet culture lives: memes, social platforms, and shared moments, often on Twitter. And utility over time, this is the one that I want to bring, this is the one I want to see. The strongest IPs keep evolving, whether it's through gaming products or real world experiences. So at the end of the day, people don't just buy into an IP, they buy into the story and the
Right,
community around it.
right. And it's actually very much reminiscent of like our early childhood if you kind of think about it, right? When we grew up with like Saturday morning cartoons, um I remember like over a period of like when I went to school, I was repeating lines from like Dexter's Laboratory, right? Like D, and later on my friends were doing the same as well, but not with Dexter's Laboratory. They were doing it with some other cartoon, and maybe perhaps this was one of what makes IP really familiar with us. And I was actually thinking, you know what? On a fun note, right? Like, which cartoon did you grow up watching that left the mark on you?
Yeah, I think growing up, Sailor Moon really stuck with me. It was one of the first shows about friendship, identity, and transformation. They were core parts to the story. And looking back, it's funny how these themes like self expression, belonging, and evolving into who you're meant to be are the same things that great IPs and great games tap into today. But my all-time favorite was Chibi
Yeah,
Muroko-chan.
Cheap
So
Mark-chan. Yeah, I remember that
it's
one. Isn't that one the little girl?
yeah, it's simple. Yeah, and the grandpa and the bigger sister and the whole family. I think it's simple, it's warm, and it's deeply human about everyday life, family, and small moments. And that emotional relatability is something I think the most enduring IPs get right.
Mm. And I think this like emotional relatability as well is something which a lot of Web3 companies they try to emulate and they bring it up all the time, but I don't think everyone successfully manages to execute on these, right? But for now, I want to understand a little bit your take on the macro landscape of things, right? Web3 IPs, NFTs, they're not really in season in crypto right now, and they're not even on the mass market. Why do you think this is the case?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. And look, I say Bitcoin took 17 years to hit escape velocity, went through 4 different winters. Every single one of them, people thought this is dead. Bitcoin is dead, right? NFTs are only 4 years old. It's going through its first 4-year cycle, and they will take the same amount of time to mature and enter mainstream. What we're seeing now is a necessary reset, less hype, more building. The next phase of NFTs won't be about flipping JPEGs. It'll be about IP, games, distribution, and experiences that people actually want to engage with. Mainstream adoption takes time, and NFTs are still very early in that journey.
Well, you said that NFTs won't be about flipping JPEGs, right? But they're building experiences. Like at face value or a very like one line, what is the sort of experience that people are looking to engage with, you think?
I think Pokemon. You trade the cards for sure. There is flipping, there is collecting, there is trading. But there's also the lore, the game, the show itself. There's also the connection, the main characters that you relate to, their journeys and arcs and the stories. So that's what I think about when I think about where NFTs are going to be.
Interesting. So it's this whole ecosystem that IPs build around, right? Yeah, you're right. Like that's really going to take some time. And even for Web3 companies to come up with that, like most of these Web3 companies, they're mainly startups, right? And to have to grow at that massive scale like Pokemon, yeah, to your point, it's definitely going to take some time. But still, Web3 companies still believe that, like NFTs and the IPs coming from Web3 is sort of like the starting point, which is worth beginning from to develop an IP ecosystem. Why do you think this is the case? Is it because Web3 has some benefits compared to Web2? What are some of the problems that, Web3 solves that Web2 cannot here?
Yeah, I want to touch on 2 points. One is the IP community. I think there's 2 directions. There's Web3 native IPs that are huge right now, the Pudgies, Doodles, the Apes, and that is great. And announce, right? Keep doing the great thing. But there's also the other direction, which is already established IPs that are very, very successful, very, very enduring with a very loyal fan base. And this is why I talk about Japan a lot. I talk about Korea a lot because I think these are these core IP holders that are, we just need to build trust for them about blockchain, the technology, and help those Web2 native IPs come on chain, right? So the second piece, going to the tech about crypto, right? So I think a lot of people miss the core point of crypto. The most important innovation isn't the token, it's encryption. Crypto, the word stem of encryption is crypto. It's crypt, right? So at its heart, crypto is about new ways to verify truth without exposing raw data. So technologies like fully homomorphic encryption make it possible to prove things, your age, location, or asset ownership, without revealing the exact underlying information. Today, this is often framed as purely a privacy feature, but I actually think the bigger unlock is product
Mm,
development. If you can verify that someone is over or under a certain age without ever knowing who they are, that changes trust and safety online dramatically. It's a huge step forward for protecting minors, teenagers, and even elderly users. without creating massive data honeypots or surveillance risk. For Blockus specifically, we think a lot about how to apply this to gaming, using cryptographic verification to enable age based content access and safer player environments, while still preserving user privacy. This is where the technology becomes truly mainstream.
Wow, I think that's really powerful right there. Using blockchain to essentially protect and guide children online for security and privacy procedures, really reducing that sort of like surveillance risk. I think a lot of adults and parents and in general essentially would really be keen on that. Is that the reason why some Web2 IPs want to engage with blockers per se, right? And if it is the case, how easy is it for Web2 companies to plug and play essentially into the blockers tech stack?
Yeah, 100%. So uh, I want to first say absolutely correct. When we have iconic IPs that explore Web3, that explore blockchain, like the Sailor Moons and Simpsons and Tom and Jerry's of the world, because they're timeless and globally recognized and emotionally embedded in people's lives, the key question for those IPs is always, how risky is this? And this is where Blockus comes in. We've built Blockus to be a plug and play tool and white glove service as much as possible. Studios can integrate wallets, on chain assets, NFTs, compliance, and distribution without having to become crypto experts or expose their audience to unnecessary risk. So, our goal is to make bring an IP into Web3 feel less like an experiment and more like launching on a new, well understood platform. That's how mainstream IP adoption actually happens.
What are some of the IPs that you're engaging with right now?
Yes, so right now we are actively engaging with a mix of gaming native studios and established entertainment IP holders who are curious about Web3 but cautious, rightfully so. Many of them care deeply about brand integrity, audience protection, and long term value, not short term token hype. We are particularly focused on IPs that already resonate with younger audiences and cross generational fans, where games, community, and digital ownership make sense as an extension of a brand, not a gimmick. And I will end the note on saying we are going fairly international because I think most people don't know this, but the best game studios are often not US centric. US has a lot of amazing ones. But when you look internationally in France, in Japan, and Korea, especially, there are very many outstanding IPs that you've interacted with for the last 10 years or gaming experiences that are created by them, hands
Any way
down.
you could reveal what's behind the curtain for us?
No.
Okay, fair enough. I guess secrecy in this industry is still very much, it prioritized, right? Okay. So we've talked about IPs that are outside of Web3. What about the IPs or the OG NFT projects like NounsDAO, for example? How would they essentially interact with blockers?
Yeah, 100%. We absolutely love OG NFT projects like Nouns. And Nouns is one of the few NFT native IPs that actually understands long term culture building, right? Open, composable, community owned. And we have to facilitate and connect Nouns to collaborate with game studios and existing IPs, most likely through crossover IP integrations, where Nouns enters an already successful game and has its own surface area, mechanics, and
Hmm.
cosmetic layer. Right? So when you think about it, an NFT collection might have 10,000 holders. That's pretty large in the world of NFTs. But when you drop that into an MMORPG with a couple million players, that's tiny, right? So crossing over, I think, would really help these OGNT projects get the visibility and get the engagement that they deserve, and perhaps attract new holders and grow the collector base and think about more fun ways to play online on chain.
Interesting. What do you think about like the mascots from projects like the Monanimals from Monad or the Boys Club, Matt Fury's Boys Club, right? Those guys, how could they then, essentially play a part in Blockus in this case?
Yeah, so chain mascots are a bit different, and I think Boys Club is a little different, right? So, the Moda animal is a good one. I think another chain has like a manta, a fish, or something, right? So I I tend to view chains as baseline infrastructure, not living worlds of their own. So mascot IPs are great for marketing and communicating identity around a certain chain and maybe memorability. But I wouldn't treat them the same way as something like Nouns, which is designed to exist as a standalone, extensible IP. This doesn't mean chain mascots can't appear in games, but they're usually better suited as a brand integration rather than the foundation of a long term entertainment
I see.
franchise. So I'm bearish, in short.
Okay, so I guess we're not going to see the Mon animals on an F1 car, for example, right? It's not going to happen. Oh, oh dear! I think we might have upset a few Monad fanboys in the chat. But is it because of this distinction between a brand extension versus an extensible IP that they fail in moving beyond Web3?
I think not. I think the chain mascots are more so for bringing awareness to the tech and the chain. And I do think chains should just be the underlying technology that serves the IP and the entertainment, right? I observe that most Web3 native IPs fail to break out of the crypto bubble because they're built for holders, not for
Hmm,
players. They optimize for ownership mechanisms before entertainment value. So mainstream audiences don't care if something is on chain. They care if it's fun, emotionally resonant, and easy to access. So think CryptoKitties of 2017, right? When you see an NFT that is hot on Instagram or TikTok, that's when you know it made it. So until an IP leads with great gameplay, storytelling, and distribution, and uses crypto as an invisible enhancement, it's very hard to escape Web3 and reach the mass market.
yeah, what was that saying again? Like, crypto is for encryption, not for tokens.
That's what I keep going back to.
Okay, okay. So entertainment value first. I think yeah, that's what really connects people because that entertainment is what draws out that emotion, which a lot of the IPs initially aim to do with their entertainment line, I guess. But anyways, just going back to that, right? In the view of entertainment value, let's talk about frameworks. Some IPs first they grow really big for free. Well, to the user it's for free, and eventually they want to find a way to monetize. Otherwise, why would they be putting all this effort for? All right, so let's talk a little bit about revenue. So if let's say an IP would come to you and say, "Hey, Jess, how could we potentially work together and get some revenue with Blockus, especially in Web3, right?" How would you take that forward?
Yeah, most definitely. For any IP holders out there, please reach out to chat more. So, yes, this is absolutely a revenue opportunity. And we think it works best when monetization is aligned across IP holders, game studios, and players, right? For existing IP projects, Blockus acts as an enablement layer rather than the toll booth. And I think few primary ways that monetization happens. One is crossover IP integration. I talked about this IP can be introduced into existing successful games as playable characters, skins, worlds, or narrative arcs. And revenue is generated through in game purchases, limited drops, or seasonal events. Halloween, Spring Festival, all great times and shared between the IP holder, the studio, and the platform. So, second is licensing and revenue share. Instead of just speculative minting, IPs can license their brand to studios building real games on Blockus with clean revenue share agreements tied to actual player spend and engagement. So, three is live ops and expansions. It's very common in gaming. IP-based content can evolve over time. New characters, modes, or collaborations, creating a very long tail revenue similar to traditional gaming live service models. And we would really want to see that start to happen with Blockus. But I think this would work is most Web3 IPs struggle because they monetize before value was created. And Blockus here, we want to flip that distribution first, gameplay first and revenue second. When IPs plug into real games with real players, monetization becomes natural and sustainable. And this is how you can get an evergreen IP and an evergreen game that goes on for 10 years, long after you first
Right.
create
And
it.
I think the name of the game here as well is how many users, how many active users do you have? You know, the DAOs, the MAOs, all of that, especially when you partner with someone like Blockers. Do you mind going a little bit more into the details for that?
Yeah, this is first of all, I have a background in data, so I strongly support data-driven studios that track their data and understand user behavior. And for that, we are talking with Dune on-chain analytics to help make that out of the box because player engagement data is transparent when your game is on-chain, right? So we want to enable especially small to medium sized game studios who might be very busy and very stretched in terms of resources and time to be able to access that very easily and very cleanly. And we want to effectively offer that out of the box. Right. Um, I think what you're getting at is the actual incentive structure, what metrics translate to what kind of revenue sharing or distribution, right? And that is something that will need to iterate over time because Web3 gaming is so new.
Right, right. Okay, I think that's yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like especially when it comes down to monetization and revenue, it's always about how can we maximally extract value, right? At the end of the day, even if it's monetary value first or second or entertainment value first, right? It's the numbers that really determines the effort, and any way that we can inflate or increase the numbers essentially is a win-win for everybody. What are some common flags with the IPs that you work with that you see and immediately make you go, not someone that we can work with?
Yeah, there's a few clear red flags that immediately tell us an IP isn't a fit for Blockus. So, first, anything that crosses the degeneracy line. If an IP is rooted in gambling mechanics, overtly sexualized content, or culture that thrives on shock value and speculation, it's not something we want adjacent to, especially if the goal is to be family friendly and accessible to mainstream players. Second, a token first mindset. If the primary question is about min size, token price, or short term upside, before gameplay audience or safety is discussed, we usually pass. That's a strong signal the IP isn't built for longevity. And third, very importantly, lack of respect for players. If a institution or project treats users purely as liquidity or exit opportunities rather than as players and fans, it fundamentally misaligns with how we think about games and IP. And finally, we avoid IPs that can't support skill based gameplay. So at Block, because we believe games should reward mastery, creativity, and progression, not just randomness or spend. If an IP can't translate into mechanics that emphasize skill and fair competition, it's probably not something we should be building together. So ultimately, Blockus is selective by design. We're building an ecosystem that parents, partners, and players can trust. And that means saying no sometimes, and that's okay with us.
With that said, how do you think Web3 gaming is going to play out in 2026? Right? What do you think is the springboard that will essentially bring Web3 gaming forward? This is in line with, with new IPs, all IPs coming on chain, and with a focus on encryption per se. How will the future play out?
Yeah, in 2026, I see Web3 gaming moving from experimentation to integration with mainstream audiences. It won't be about crypto games as a niche anymore. It'll be about games that are fun first and use Web3 tech, like digital ownership, composability, and encryption to enhance the experience. Encryption in particular will be a game changer. So, fully homomorphic encryption will let studios verify things like age, location, or asset holdings without seeing sensitive data. That opens the door to safer, more inclusive environments, builds trust with IP holders and regulators alike, and most importantly, really enables small to medium sized studios to have the same publication power as a mega publisher of today. So, who will welcome IP and encryption? I think the early adopters will likely be IP holders and studios that already care about brand integrity. Entertainment companies, global franchises, and family friendly brands, as well as medium sized indie studios. They see encryption as a solution to compliance headache like GDPR in the EU and as a tool to unlock new audiences and experiences safely. So on the crypto native side, projects that understand long-term culture, right? So think nouns or other DAO-led communities. I think they will embrace IB collaborations that are meaningful and not just token driven. World of Women is another one that I love that I hold. So I will show them endlessly, and I think they could be a great collection as well to engage meaningfully with IPs.
Right. Maybe let's go a layer a little bit slightly deeper. Are there any sort of data or analytics that companies are doing in relation to Web3 adoption? Are there some signals that indicate that people are looking into Web3? Potentially, what are those signals?
I think the biggest, most clear signals always first come from closed door conversations with the studios and the IP holders. And you get a sense of the sentiment. And, I do say Blockus probably sees 70 to 80% of the gaming movements out there, right? So we get to sample the whole thing. And I still see two waves. I think on one side, a lot of the big players are de-risking in the sense they're letting go of their internal teams that they formed starting in 2021. So layoffs are happening. And we see that in the recruiting pipeline more than anything else. And that may not necessarily be a bad thing, right? I think learning that you can't just build an internal blockchain team is a move in a positive direction because you can't, because the space moves so fast and you cannot keep up. However good your internal head of blockchain is, this is a real job. You need an outside company, and we do see some caution, like some pullback in terms of investment, in terms of headcount and teams and things like that. But at the same time, we still see more risk on exploration. So there's two camps. Camp one goes, okay, like I tried a little bit something, it didn't quite work out. I think I'm going to give it like one last try, one last start on the board, see if it hits. Like, what can you do for me? This is an IP. Like show me how it's done, right? And I'll decide based on this. Um, and that's usually people who have shipped a couple IPs during the last cycle and feel a little bit burnt, right? By the community, by the traction, by what happened. But then we see another crowd that has not gotten in the last circle, so they were moving slowly, but that slowness actually protects them. And now they're going, like this is interesting. Okay, last cycle, look, I've seen all these things. I have this bag of IPs. Here are my, small and loyal and mid-tier ones. Like, what can I do with this? Like, this is a bag of goodies. Like, what do you think? Like, and they're actually very open and very explorative. So we love that, and I think they're gonna have a better experience integrating with blockchain than the first movers because yeah, some of them like really just did not have a good experience. Right, can't blame them for leaving. Of course, we're trying to bring them back, and so they don't feel super jaded and wait 5 years and completely miss the cycle and come back in like 2030, which will still be here. We'll still onboard you. That's great. But, we want to see them develop things during this cycle as well,
I
during this
see.
run.
You've got all this like signals on the side, and essentially you would have a crystal ball of sorts. Now that you've all this data, like what would an ideal future of Web3 gaming look like for you?
I talk a lot and I just swapped out my pinned tweet. So, an ideal future of Web3 gaming is we see blockchain on console. On
Mm,
gaming console, right? The core home of where the most deeply tapped in players live. So console has the highest wallet size per player at $80. That's higher than mobile, which sits at around 20, and higher than PC, which is $10. And what that signals is these are the IPs that are most worth collecting and trading because there's already heavy investment upfront. Right. So I actually think, contrary to popular belief, where people think you should work from, start from the bottom, work the PC games, work the mobile games, right? I think you need to start from the top, right? the consoles onboarded on chain, and it's a high leverage play as well. So PlayStation alone has a 30 billion
Wow.
revenue as of 2024. So their 2025 numbers are still, the accounting is working hard there, but 30 billion. If we can increase that market, increase the sales by 1%, that's a $300 million annual opportunity, right? And that's something I think that's very realistic when you let that 30 billion now compound with IP, with collectability that pull people back into that IP over time.
Incredible. All right, so that was some really interesting insight. Jess, we are approaching the end of our conversation. I would like to ask, if you could let the audience walk away with one takeaway today, what would it be?
If there's one thing I want people to walk away with today, it's this. Web3 isn't just about tokens or speculation. It's about building new ways for players, IPs, and communities to interact safely, meaningfully, and creatively. The technology, especially encryption and on chain ownership, unlocks experiences that weren't possible before. And the projects that focus on real players first are the ones that will last.
Nice, nice. I think this was a really interesting conversation. We talked about FHE. We talked about having the blockchain for securitizing against surveillance risk. Talked about console gaming, and what it all sorts of leads up to is that, people wouldn't even have to interact with the blockchain at all at some point. And I think that's a pretty exciting move when people are using your infrastructure without even realizing you'll essentially be the sugar in the coffees of the everyday lives of people. And that's something really, really interesting to see in the realm of tech gaming. And more power to the people, right, through decentralized infrastructure. Just super interesting conversation. What is the best way that people can find you?
Right. The easiest way to reach me is on Twitter at the Web3 Jess. I love to connect with IP holders, studios, and builders who are thinking seriously about bringing games and communities into Web3.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today's episode of the AthenaX live stream. I hope you had gotten some insights from this one, and I will see you at the next live stream. Bye bye.